I've got experts in the studio, and this is my first time with them. And all I want to simply say is welcome back to another edition of All Things Legal with AL Inc. And we'll introduce the lady behind all of that. So we're breaking down some key legal topics that impacts your life rather. And today we are discussing trust, and I know Alayna is going to tell us what they covered before that. So we're going to hear what they are, why they matter, and the financial implications of having one. So it's a very, very important conversation to get in. So let me quickly just say hello to. Let me find this lady. Let's do this. Alayna, hello and welcome.
Hi, Marco.
It's good to have you here on Thrive Time.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm going to ask you to introduce the lady to your right. Who are you bringing in here today?
Well, Andrea Engle, who is our lead attorney at Al Incorporated, that heads up the Wills, Estates and Trust Department. And as you've already shared, we are going to talk about trust, all things trust today. And Andrea will lead us into that discussion.
I see Ntsiki, Alayna is so versed here. Like an expert in this.
She's been doing this.
I've been missing out, it looks like.
You have.
So I will just go back, Alayna. So I know you guys spoke about, I think, wills and estates. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, we've covered an array of different topics around estate management. We've covered the Wills Act. We've covered Administration of Estates Act, and today I know there's much anticipation about diving into the topic of trust. So I'm pretty excited to hear what Andrea is going to share today.
Talking about that, welcome, Andrea Engle. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Marco. It's so good to be here. Okay. Nice to see you guys.
It's good to have experts in the studio, of course, and it's a very important topic and subject matter, of course. So, Andrea, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a trust?
Sure.
And why must someone also choose that? That's it, to set one up. Let's hear about that.
Awesome. So a trust is a legal entity that's created to actually administer assets on behalf of beneficiaries. And trusts are very common in South Africa and all around the world because they're really good tools to manage assets for other individuals and also to protect your assets and keep it out of your personal estate. And some advantages of trusts is, as I've mentioned, the assets are not considered as part of your personal estate, which means that if a trust is set up correctly, your assets can be protected should you become insolvent or should you be a businessman who's got a lot of risk in his business. It's also a good idea if you want to protect your assets for generations to come, because we work so hard to create wealth for our families and to leave a legacy. And this is a really good way to ensure that your assets are managed well for your children and their children. Trusts are also very good when it comes to, as I've said, generally protecting your assets and allowing your family to benefit from what you've created. And in some cases, it can save you money when it comes to estate duty and executors' fees in your personal estates.
Sure, we're talking some big things here today, and it's just getting me more excited, of course. But I know we're not just talking about one type of trust, is many. And let's talk about those different types of trust that's available. And also, can you break down the main categories and the purposes, such as discretionary trust, family trust, and also the charitable trust as well?
Of course. So discretionary trusts are basically where you give your trustees, who are individuals that you appoint to look after the assets for your beneficiaries, full discretion to administer the trust. So beneficiaries actually have something called a contingent right, which means they are entitled to the benefits of the trust. So that includes your income in the trust and sometimes capital assets. So that's like if you have a property in trust, your beneficiary may be entitled to the rental income or the actual property itself. And discretionary trusts are when trustees can determine when they pay out distributions to beneficiaries and how much they pay out to beneficiaries. And then in terms of a charitable trust, that's a type of inter vivos trust, which is a living trust that can be established for the purpose of a charitable organization. And charitable trusts are quite nice because you can be entitled to some tax benefits. For example, if you become a public benefit organization, SARS will obviously allow you to be tax exempt. And then other types of common trusts like family trust is where you within your family create a trust where you'll look after wealth for your children and their children to come.
It's good. I'm learning and I'm thriving here on the show, of course. Alayna, you want to add anything to that, or should I just continue asking Ms. Engle there, of course, all of these fantastic questions? She's doing very well. And I didn't know so much about all of those things, but let's quickly just find out a little bit more. So I want to ask you, Andrew, what are some of the financial implications
Mm.
of having a trust? And are there tax benefits and other things? How does taxation of trust generally work then?
Sure. So there are a lot of benefits to having a trust. The ones I've already mentioned is asset protection and also keeping your assets safe as they fall out of your personal estate. There are some possible tax savings like estate duty, which is a tax that you pay when you pass away. That tax is calculated on the value of your personal assets. So if the trust assets no longer form part of your estate, obviously there's a saving there. You may also save on your executor's fees, which Alayna would have discussed previously on the show with you guys. And other advantages is that trusts offer you protection in case there are minor beneficiaries. So if you have a child and you pass away and you create a testamentary trust in your will, that asset will be looked after for your child until they're able to actually administer the funds themselves. And if you don't have a structure in place for them, their money actually falls into something called the Guardians Fund, which is administered by the government and is very difficult to get money out of because of the admin involved. So it's just a good way to protect your beneficiaries and your minor heirs if you pass away before they turn 18.
That sounds very good. But I hear this voice here in the back of my mind saying, what are the pros and cons though? Let's get into that, because I know some people are saying that sounds very good, but now let's get into that. What are some of the risks or negatives of setting up a trust that people should be aware of then?
So I think negatives of a trust, let's discuss living trusts first. And they can be expensive to set up because you need an attorney to draft a trust deed for you, and that must go through a process to be registered at the master's office, which is why I would recommend AL Incorporated, just saying. But they are expensive to also maintain because you need to file tax returns for your trust each year. You also need to declare the beneficial ownership to the master's office. You need to possibly pay someone to be an independent trustee if you have a family trust. So it is a very expensive and administratively burdensome trust to have, unfortunately. And other disadvantages is that when you register a trust, you actually have to hand over ownership of the assets to your trustees.
Sure.
And that's a very important requirement in South Africa. So obviously, I mean, if you hand over your assets to a trustee and the majority of trustees disagree with you on how to manage the assets, you do face some difficulty as well.
So I think my follow-up question to that is, who is this for? I want to particularly talk about age groups. So I don't know when people start to do this, but at what stage then in life or financial situations should people start considering setting up a trust?
Good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. Thank you. I think for a testamentary trust, as soon as you have minor children or a beneficiary that isn't able to look after funds for themselves, you should consider setting up a testamentary trust. You actually do that by just having a will drafted, which creates a trust, and the trust is only activated when you pass away. So anyone with minor children should set up a testamentary trust. It's free of charge because it's in your will, and that saves you a lot of money when it comes to setting up the trust. But for a living trust, like a family trust, I think it depends on what people's desired outcome is. If you are a young family or a young individual who's building your business and finding alternative sources of income, it's a good idea to look at whether a trust is beneficial for you and whether you want to keep certain assets out of your personal name. So it's very much case dependent, but that's why it's a good idea to chat to an attorney and get some assistance to figure it out.
I think that's right. From what I'm hearing here now, it's obviously something you can't do on your own. You need to have fantastic advice, and we have the people in the studio with us. Alayna, talk to us about that. I know we've now covered the trust and wills and estates, but she mentioned something about those wills that's very important, especially now when it comes to the trust. Do you want to speak into that quickly?
Yeah, I think one of the shocking statistics in South Africa is that only 80% of people, 80% of people don't have wills. So only 15% of us do. And I mean, it's a document that it's the only type of document that can speak to what happens when you are no longer there.
Yeah.
If you didn't leave a will, or if you didn't establish a trust, then the government will make, or legislation will make decisions for you.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, particularly if you do have assets, if you do have immovable property, and if you do have children. The other thing I wanted to mention was, when we discussed charitable trusts, is that CCFM is a registered trust.
Yeah.
And they have PBO status. And just a few, I think last week it was, Marco, where you had your share-a-thon
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
Well done. Did tune in. It was lovely. And yeah, so it really is, there is benefits to having a trust. But I think what Andrea said is so profound, that there is no one size fits all rule of law when it comes
Yeah.
to estate planning. So it is essential that you zoom into your own personal circumstances, and based on that, speak to an expert in the subject matter.
Yeah.
That can give you a customized estate plan, really.
Yeah.
And it's not just to say what happens at the time of death, but it's also what is the best strategy to build wealth, going forward, not just for you, but also the family that you will leave behind.
That's an amazing stat that you just gave there in terms of the 80% that don't have a will.
Mm-hmm.
Just drill down or zone into why is it that people, why they don't take up the option of having a will? Because like I said, if you don't express what your last will and testimony is, somebody else will do it for you. So why do people not make use of this opportunity then?
Well, I guess it's the myth of it's too complicated, or I can't do it myself, But I mean, when we covered the requirements in terms of the Wills Act, it was so basic. I mean, you at home could write a will up. As long as you meet the fundamental requirements, which is that it must be in writing. It doesn't have to be typed, as long as it's in writing, as long as there's the two signatures of witnesses,
Okay.
as well as the testator, and as long as those witnesses is competent and the testator competent. It's as simple as that. So I also do believe that people think that writing wills or estate planning is only for the wealthy, and that again is a farce. It's not true.
Yeah.
If you do have any form of assets, and you want to exercise control and power of the gifting of that asset, then draft a will. Why not?
I'm so glad for that. That's exactly why I'm asking that question, because sometimes we do think it's for the wealthy, and we probably think we can't leave an inheritance for our offspring, which we have you guys here to explain that. We have to land, but Andrea, anything that you still want to say before we go?
I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to come and share this information with your listeners, and that you can contact Alayna should you need any assistance or guidance in drafting a will, or figuring out if a trust is for you and whether it's the right time to look at one.
Alayna, you have the final word.
Oh, yes. So you can contact us either via email at hello@linc-inc.co.za, or on WhatsApp 0658 444 347.
Awesome. And so this is the slot where you get all of these illegal, what do we call it? Advice, right? On a Tuesday. We must tell the people.
Well, the slot is called All Things
Yes,
Legal with
yes.
Al Inc.
That's what I'm trying to lead up to. The people come and tune in. You get
Love it.
fantastic advice here on a Tuesday, of course. And I think it's such valuable advice in Ntsiki.
Yeah, I just want to add, we do note the questions that do come in, Marco.
Yeah.
We do have a folder that at the end of the segments that we'll have, Alayna will then take time to answer all of them. So Clive, we have noted your question, and we will keep it in our question and answer folder, and Alayna will get to it when we are done with all the segments.
So a very, very good question that came through that, but I think it's so great to have the expertise like Alayna and Andrea to answer that. We're going to go to a break. And actual fact, and Ntsiki, I think you need to put people in the know in terms of traffic before we get
correct.
there. Because we must have lekker traffic here on Thrive Time with
MNN.
That's what I was going to say there. But let's quickly get into that. I say thank you to the ladies, of course, being in there next week again. This time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Ntsiki.
So we're going to go to that traffic, and then do you think